Welcome to our video on players who have forced rule changes in the NBA. The NBA is a league that is constantly evolving, and some players have had such a profound impact on the game of basketball that the league has been forced to make changes to the rules to accommodate their unique skill sets. In this video, we will be discussing players who have had the most significant impact on the league and how their actions led to changes in the rules. Number 1. Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain was one of the most dominant players in NBA history. At 7'1" and 275 pounds, he was an unstoppable force on the court. However, his size and strength also led to a number of rule changes. One of the most notable changes was the introduction of the offensive goaltending rule. Prior to the 1967 and 68 season, players were allowed to touch the ball while it was in the cylinder above the rim. Chamberlain, with his size and jumping ability, was able to swat away countless shots, leading to the introduction of the rule. Another rule change that was a direct result of Chamberlain's play was the widening of the lane. Prior to the 1951-52 season, the lane was only about 6 feet wide. However, Chamberlain's size and dominance in the paint led the league to widen the lane to 12 feet in order to open up the game and make it more difficult for him to dominate. Number 2. Bill Russell. Bill Russell, like Wilt Chamberlain, was a dominant big man during his time in the league. He won 11 championships with the Boston Celtics, and his defensive prowess led to a number of rule changes. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the defensive 3-second rule. Prior to the 2001-02 season, defenders were allowed to camp out in the paint for an unlimited amount of time. However, Russell's ability to control the paint and disrupt the opposing team's offense led the league to introduce a rule limiting the amount of time a defender could spend in the paint without guarding an opponent. Another change that was a direct result of Russell's play was the introduction of the offensive rebound rule. Prior to the 1956-57 season, offensive rebounds were not counted as a part of the team's rebound total. However, Russell's ability to control the defensive glass led the league to change the rule and count offensive rebounds as a part of a team's total. Number 3. George Mikan. George Mikan was one of the first true big men in the NBA, and his dominance in the paint led to a number of rule changes in the game. One of the most significant changes to the game of basketball was the introduction of the shot clock. Prior to the 1954-55 season, teams could hold the ball for an unlimited amount of time, leading to slow-paced defensive games. One example of this is the 1950 NBA Finals between the Fort Wayne Pistons and the Minneapolis Lakers. The Minneapolis Lakers were seen as the much more talented team in this finals, but the coach of the Fort Wayne Pistons still wanted a finals win and would not give up so easily. He ordered his team to stall as well as possible, leading to a game with a final score of 19-18, where the Fort Wayne Pistons were victorious, barely stealing out the win in the last 6 seconds. Angrily, the coach of the Minneapolis Lakers was recorded saying that play like that will kill professional basketball, which seemed to strike a chord in many fans and players. With the 1950 NBA Finals result, seeing some defensive play, and seeing MIKAN's dominant performance in the paint for so many years, led the league to introduce a 24-second shot clock to speed up the game and make it more offensive-oriented. Another change that was a direct result of MIKAN's play was the introduction of the goaltending rule. Prior to the 1951-52 season, players were not allowed to touch the ball while it was in the cylinder above the rim. However, MIKAN's size and jumping ability led the league to change the rule and allow players to touch the ball in the cylinder. Number 4. Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is considered by many to be the greatest player of all time. and his impact on the game led to a number of rule changes. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the hand-checking rule. Prior to the 1997-98 season, defenders were allowed to use their hands to impede the progress of the offense. Jordan's quickness and ball handling abilities made it difficult for defenders to guard him without using their hands. The league introduced the hand-checking rule in order to open up the game and make it more difficult for defenders to slow down the league's best players. Another change that was a direct result of Jordan's play was the introduction of the Jordan rules. These were a set of defensive guidelines put in place by the Detroit Pistons in order to slow down Jordan and the Chicago Bulls during their intense rivalry in the late 80s and early 90s. The rules focused on physical and aggressive defense and included double-teaming Jordan and denying him the ball. Number 5. Steph Curry. Steph Curry is considered one of the greatest shooters in NBA history, and his impact on the game led to a few rule changes. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the Curry rule, which referred to the way that Curry and other players would use their offhand to create space on the floor. The league introduced a rule that would penalize players for using their offhand to create space that would give them an unfair advantage. Another change that was a direct result of Curry's play was the introduction of another Curry rule, which referred to the size of the ball. Steph's accuracy and consistency from long range led the league to consider the size of the ball and impact it had on a player's shooting. Number 6. Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal was one of the most dominant centers of his time, and his size and strength led to a number of rule changes. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the hack-a-Shaq rule. This rule was introduced in response to teams intentionally fouling O'Neal when he was at the free throw line, as he was a notoriously poor free throw shooter. The rule now allows for teams to be penalized for intentionally fouling poor free throw shooters. Another change that was a direct rule of O'Neal's play was the introduction of the Shaq rule. This rule was introduced to allow officials to use instant replay to determine if a player was fouled while in the act of shooting, and it was primarily targeted at O'Neal, who was known for drawing contact in the paint. Number 7. LeBron James. LeBron is widely considered one of the greatest players of all time, and his impact while in the league has also led to a few rule changes. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the LeBron rule, which allows teams to offer their own free agents a 5-year contract with a salary increase of up to 7.5% annually. This rule was introduced in response to James's decision to leave the Cleveland Cavaliers and join the Miami Heat in 2010, and it was designed to give teams a better chance to retain their star players. Similar to Steph Curry, LeBron James had an impact on the rule regarding whether a player can use their offhand or not to help themselves create space. Number 8. Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson was one of the most iconic and influential players of his time, and his impact on the league had led to a number of rule changes. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the Iverson rule, which allows players to wear headbands during games. This rule was introduced in response to Iverson's refusal to conform to the league's dress code, as he decided he liked wearing a headband during his games. Another change that was a direct result of Iverson's play was the introduction of another Iverson rule, referring to the way that Iverson and other players would use their crossover move to create space on the floor. The league introduced a rule that would penalize players for using their crossover move to create space that would give them an unfair advantage. To conclude, these players have had a profound impact on the NBA, and their actions have led to changes in the NBA rule set. From Wilt Chamberlain's size and strength to Steph Curry's shooting, these players have pushed the boundaries of the game and forced the league to adapt to them. The NBA will continue to evolve, and it will be interesting to see which players in the future will have a similar impact and lead to further changes in the rules. Thank you for watching, Please be sure to like and subscribe.